How can you avoid a $10,000 private label mistake? We're going to talk about that and 4 other mistakes to avoid in this episode of the Amazon Seller Podcast.
This is the Amazon Seller Podcast, hosted by multi-million-dollar Amazon sellers helping you launch your private label business to the next level. Find us on amazingfreedom.com or subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and YouTube.
Hey, welcome back to the Amazon Seller Podcast. My name is Nathan, and I'm here with Leron Hirschgorn and Andy Slamans to bring you an exciting episode about private label and Amazon selling and mistakes that you can avoid in order to have private label success. Before we get into that, I just want to remind you to join the Amazing Freedom Amazon Sellers Facebook group. This is an awesome group where we're constantly sharing tips and information, answering questions, doing live videos. A really great group. Join the Amazing Freedom Amazon Sellers Facebook group if you haven't yet. Pick up your phone and join it right now. I also want to remind you to go to amazingfreedom.com/retreat. We have a really exciting retreat coming up in October of this year. If you've never looked into going to one of our retreats, they've been really super successful so far. So you can see what past retreat members have said so far. And you can actually join us for a weekend of private label networking, learning, and fun. And that's at amazingfreedom.com/retreat. Check it out and see if it makes sense for you. All right, so in this episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about the $10,000 Amazon private label mistake that you can avoid. And Andy, you actually, not that long ago, talked to a private label seller who made this $10,000 mistake, which sparked this podcast topic, right? So why don't you tell us what this mistake was and how we can avoid this crucial mistake?
Sure. So this podcast is going to be a let's get real podcast. A lot of times, you listen to different folks that are in our space. They'll talk a lot about their success stories, which is good. It can be inspirational. But sometimes the things that we can learn the best are from mistakes, right, that other people make. And unfortunately, I'm going to share a story with you of a gentleman that came up to Leron and I when we were at a conference. And his story wasn't the first one that I heard. And so I've listened to numerous folks share similar situations as this. So this gentleman was a brand new Amazon seller. He had never sold anything before. He took a course. Unfortunately, he didn't take our course. I forget which one that he took. And he picked a product that was way too saturated. And so he came to Leron and I, and he basically had $10,000 worth of stale, dead inventory that was probably like on page 569 for the keywords that he wanted to rank for because there was so much competition. So he basically did like what we call a Me Too product. He saw a product that was selling on Amazon. It was really hot. And he tried to bring the exact same thing to the Amazon catalog that had probably like 400 other listings. And so, he came to us basically like with tears in his eyes. He had a full-time job, right? So this was his first product. He had hopes and dreams of being able to sell on Amazon full-time. But right from the get-go, right, the first product just crushed those because he was basically stuck with $10,000 worth of stale, dead inventory. So this is something that, we constantly talk about in our course. To the members who take our course, we try to teach them, to use the data and analyze the competition to make sure that they're not going to they're not going to find themselves in a similar situation as this gentleman did. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I just want to add that, it sounds, when people are picking product, it sounds really good to look, at listings on Amazon. And I think in this case, this was like a mandolin slicer, and look and say, wow, like, look at all these mandolin slicers. They're selling so well. I'm going to do a mandolin slicer, and, these products are killing it on Amazon. And yeah, if I do it, then of course I'm just going to get a piece of that, pie that's there. And that's actually not not the case. Those sellers that are on the first page are there probably because they got in before sort of a lot of other sellers did. They got in early, or they have really, really deep pockets to be able to do some heavy, heavy marketing of the product that, takes some time to recover, maybe spending, 10, 20,000 out of the gate, just marketing the product, where, if you're starting out with, $3,000, $4,000 for a product, you're not going to be at that same level. And so, you can't just really look at, the listings on Amazon and say, hey, these guys are doing really well, I'm going to do the same thing, because you need to really evaluate the competition. In this case, there were pages and pages of, very, very similar products on Amazon.
Okay, so what's our advice then to those listening who say, that's kind of my fear. I'm worried about picking a product that is going to be too saturated, because like Andy mentioned, this is a big part of our course is dedicated to researching and finding a product, right? Because this topic is so important. I know that we often tell our members in our webinars that we are, private webinars we hold in our group, that, if you pick the wrong product initially, it can be very tough to, you're kind of fighting uphill battle. I know you say that a lot, Leron, because if you pick the right product and you do everything else wrong, you could maybe still have some success just because you have the right product. But if you pick the wrong product, it's very hard to, move forward with that and find success long term, just because it's not a good product. Like a mandolin slicer, for 99% of the listings on Amazon, probably is not a good product. Now, maybe for those top 6 on the first page for mandolin slicer, yeah, they're doing well, like you said. But for most sellers, it ends up being not a good product. So what's kind of our tips? I know we spend a lot of time with this. What will be your guys' advice? And is this what we're talking about mean that private label is just too saturated? There's no opportunities out there? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So my advice to other sellers would be that you really need to spend, the 80-20, right? If you follow the 80-20 principle, right, that 20% of your efforts are going to produce 80% of the results. With private label, that 80% is, should be spent on product research, because, when you're coming up, on multiple pages of listings for a product that all looks the same, that's a big red flag not to go and do that product. And, unfortunately, a lot of the courses out there that teach private label, teach people to do it in an easy way, right? So that they don't have some initial challenges. And so they tell people to pick a product that's small and light, fits in a shoebox. You can source it for under, $6-7. And the reason is because that's sort of easy, right? People can afford it. You don't have to ship by boat, which requires a customs bond and, a little bit more logistical kind of, at least fears for people. And so a lot of people go the easy route and end up going to really saturated areas where you should be thinking exactly, how do I source products that maybe other people are not, or that aren't, saturated, that people are not going to look at. And so what we teach exact opposite of that. We teach to look into niches. And, we say the riches are in the niches, right? To look into areas that are not saturated but still have customer demand, and it really all starts with doing keyword research. And so this is just one of one of several mistakes we see people making with private label.
And we keep using the word saturated. How would you kind of explain that word saturated to someone who's not into private label yet? And in your opinion, I know it depends on the niche and the category and everything, but is there any kind of easy ways that our listeners can identify if a product might be saturated?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, saturated means that there's a lot more supply than there is demand, right? And so that means there are more listings than people looking for the product. And so what happens is when you have more supply than demand, you have downward movement on price, and you have sellers getting squeezed out because there's just more competition than there is sales to go around. And so you just get pushed out.
And I will say, it's a lot of people, a lot of our members will ask us, just give us the number of listings that's too many, right? And it's kind of a loaded question to ask us, right? Because it really does depend on that demand. Like you said, it's a supply and demand. If there's a lot of demand, then there may be more room for more sellers. Now, sometimes some listings will kind of dominate. We'll maybe talk about that in another episode. But if there's more demand, then there's probably more room for some supply. I think of a recent example in this year is fidget spinners, right? So fidget spinners I think it's on a down decline of demand. So I wouldn't personally launch into this now. But if you got into it earlier, there was a ton of demand, like demand unlike anything we've seen this year. Maybe there's stuff in previous years, but there was just so much demand. So yeah, there was 100 listings earlier in the year before, now there's probably 1,000 or a couple thousand, but maybe there was 100. I think there were a lot of different listings that were getting demand because there was different colors. You could have variations, something to change them up a little bit. So I think a lot of listings were getting orders and sales and revenue because there just was so much demand there. So that's kind of a quick example. Now, that was a fad that kind of went up and down pretty quick, like some fads do. So we typically don't recommend going after just a brief fad like a fidget spinner. And we talk about a lot on our podcast how to build a brand, right? How to kind of build your private label products for long-term success. But I think that's a good example in that case. So, okay. So Andy, I know a lot of people, again, have this kind of fear of picking the wrong product. That's why I think one of the things that's so cool about our course and our inner circle group is we actually will basically evaluate people's products for them, right? Can you kind of just talk about that? And then also just why that's such a benefit to be able to kind of get a second opinion on a product.
Sure. So that's one of the things that I love the most about what we do in our course. A lot of times when people are just getting into private label, their biggest fear is what we're talking about. Two things. They don't understand how to find products. They don't understand how to find those hidden niches. And then the second thing that often causes them paralysis is they're fearful of falling into this trap that we're talking about today. And so what we've done in our course for our members, and that I know of, no one else does this. We've actually created a very powerful, what we call product evaluation tool. And so when members of our course find a potential product, they take about a half hour to fill out this product evaluation tool. And Nate, maybe you can go into, exactly what all the metrics are. And then we personally, the three of us, will sit down once a week and we spend about 3 hours, right, going through all these evaluations, all these potential product evaluations that the members of our course give us. And then we give them great feedback. So sometimes the feedback is, hey, look, this is a great product. Like, you need to jump on this tomorrow. Contact a supplier, get your sample. We think that this has huge potential. And then sometimes we say, hey, you know what? We don't think this is a good product. Like, it's too saturated. And then we'll go down the reasons why we don't think it's a great product. And so that's a huge benefit. It allows them to understand the process and the thought process that we personally use in picking the products that we've launched. And then it gives them incentive to either move on to find more products or to really start attacking the product that they gave us.
Yeah, so that's definitely a huge benefit, I think. So the guide is actually pretty in-depth, and it's actually designed so that once you fill it out, you almost get a better idea yourself before you even send it to us, whether it's a good product or not, because basically the guide asks you questions like, how many different listings that are similar to your product are already on Amazon? What's the main keyword you want to go after? And then there's a whole basically cost and potential profit calculator involved with that guide as well, right? So there's quite a few fields, but you can fill it out, send it to us. And I'll kind of answer my own question I asked earlier about, is private label being too saturated? So one of the cool things, we've probably evaluated a couple of hundred of these guides just this year, up in, the last 6-7 months. And, we often say that out of those hundreds of guides that we've looked at, there are, almost no duplicates or very few products that are the same. And maybe they're even in the same niche, but not the exact same product. So what's so cool about that is it just shows that different sellers find different opportunities on Amazon. No two sellers are going to look at all the same products, right? Andy might do research for an hour and come up with a completely different set of potential products than Liran does when he does research for an hour, right? There's just so many opportunities on Amazon in the catalog and beyond the catalog, even that aren't on Amazon yet, that there's definitely still opportunity out there. And something cool that I think, I know Liran said last time, a couple of weeks ago, I heard him say this, that, if private label is too saturated, if we felt like that, we wouldn't be launching new products ourselves all the time, right? I know Andy and Liran are constantly looking to bring new listings, new inventory into the Amazon marketplace. And that's because they truly believe that there's still opportunity there, right? That's the best place to invest their money for their business. They're not going, personally with their business, they're not going into the stock market or, into something else. Maybe they do that beyond that, but for their business, they think this is the best opportunity where they can make money right now. So I think that kind of, there's still the opportunity out there, but you have to get the product research right and you have to bring the right product initially. So I think that gives us a good look at that mistake, what to avoid. We actually have 4 other mistakes we want to talk about too that potentially could be $10,000 mistakes as well, right? All of these mistakes could be. That first one, definitely. The next mistake we're going to look at is people who are wanting to do a test order for all their products, which initially sounds like a really good idea, right? It sounds like you would want to do a test order, but Liran, can you share with us maybe why you would not want to do a test order for all of your products before you decide on one?
Sure. So just to add to one more point on picking products, when you pick the wrong product, it's almost impossible to recover from. When you pick the right product, even if you don't do some of the following steps that well, if you pick the right product, then sometimes you don't necessarily even have to do all that much from a marketing or launch standpoint to get it going. If you really pick the right product, I have a product that I launched recently that I haven't done any sort of launch with, giveaway or anything. Just got really great photos, made a great listing, and probably right now selling around between $9,000 to $10,000 a month. I have actually no reviews on the product at this point, and I've sold hundreds of units. And that was just picking a product that was just kind of ripe for a seller coming in with a great listing for a market that had the demand, but not enough good listings, not a lot of FBA sellers, for example, mostly MF. And so it was a market that was ripe to exploit. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to find. When it comes to test orders, a lot of people will say, well, let me test a generic product from like AliExpress or something, not branded or anything, and throw it up on Amazon and see if it sells. The issue is that you often need to have a launch strategy in place. And so if you only have 25 or 50 units, then you can't really put that launch strategy in place to generate sales velocity to get traction with your product. And so you're probably not going to get anywhere quickly. I mean, you could do some PPC, again, have a good listing. But again, if you're testing 50 units, are you really going to invest in amazing photos? Are you really going to invest in great copywriting? You're probably not, because you're kind of testing. And so you're not, one, going to go sort of all in on the product. And two, you're not going to have enough units to be able to generate that initial sales velocity to gain traction. And so you're generally hurting yourself by going with that strategy. Like, it actually might be a great opportunity for that product, but by not having enough units, you are not going to do a proper launch to get it going.
Awesome. So that gives us a good look at another mistake to avoid that I hear a lot of people talk about. And a lot of times it's people who are new to private label, right? Because you have that feeling you want to kind of do a test. You don't want to go all in maybe, which, almost can hinder you, right? Because you're kind of tiptoeing your way around the private label process, which if you just went after the process that, we teach and we talk about all the time, you would find success. But when you kind of only try to half do it, it almost, hurts you more than it helps you. So I think that's a good look at it. All right. So a third mistake to avoid is ordering too many units, right? So maybe Andy, if you want to talk to us about, what you think is kind of a good initial number of units to target, what factors are involved with making that decision, and kind of what happens if someone orders too many units, and what the effects could be of that.
Sure. So you really have to do your due diligence and understand the amount of units that are currently being sold. And so again, this is something that we deep dive in with the members of our course. Sometimes folks overestimate the actual demand of a product. And so instead of having an initial order of 500 units, maybe they order 5,000, and they don't realize it, but they just bought like 2 years worth of inventory. And so what you have to do is you have to go, there's certain systems that you can use where you can get really good estimates. And again, part of our private label evaluation tool, it helps with that process, where it gives you an idea if you're purchasing like a month's worth of inventory or 3 months worth of inventory. And so you just have to really understand, what those metrics are when you place that first order, so that you know how many months of inventory you're buying.
And I think some people make the mistake of not trying to get a lower initial order because their supplier tells them like, you need to order 5,000 units, right? And they don't even try to negotiate for that lower MOQ, is what you see it called on, supplier websites. It's a minimum order quantity, right? So some people just be like, okay, that's what I have to do. That's the amount. And, in our experience and everyone that we've talked to and dealt with, most suppliers are going to negotiate on that MOQ. They're typically going to come down. It might not be the first time you ask. It might not be the second time you ask, but the third, the fourth, if you keep kind of getting onto them saying that you want to do a lower first order, and then your plan is, once you can confirm quality and all that, is to place large orders in the future, that can be really beneficial, because you might get that 5,000 down to 1,000 or down to 500, right? I've seen on Alibaba maybe where it says, 5,000 MOQ, but once I actually start talking with, a rep from that company, it actually ends up being, I can do 500. So it's definitely worth exploring. And then Liron, I know another kind of mistake that goes along with this that people make is that they see that the number one listing is selling really, really well, and then, they kind of base their numbers exactly on that. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, when you launch a product, you can't expect that you're going to be in the number one, listing on the first page. So, I generally shoot to be, if I've done my research and I've done my homework, I generally shoot to be on the first page for my targeted keyword. But, it's possible that I'm going to be towards the bottom of the first page, or that I'm not always going to be at the top of the first page. And also, you're going to take sort of maybe a share of the existing sales. And so you can't base your prediction on, the number 1 and 2 top sellers. We had this question, yesterday, actually, in our inner circle group. Somebody asked, I want to make sure for my first order, I order enough stock so I don't go out of stock quickly. And my answer was that I rather go, and they asked, how many units should you order for your first order? And, one, I think it depends on the price of the product. If you're ordering a product that's, $5 a unit versus $20 a unit, you're probably going to order maybe a different amount. But I generally order 300 to 500 units on my first order. Even if I think that I might sell, 1,000 units in my first month, I rather be more conservative and go out of stock than, end up getting, stuck with a bunch of product. So my recommendation is, don't overestimate what you might sell initially, because you're not going to sell as many as the number 1, number 2 sellers on the first page. And so you want to be more conservative. And again, you can always place another order and get the product ranking again. It's better to do that than be stuck with inventory.
It's a cash flow game too, right? Like if you use up all your cash flow in that order and it doesn't work out, then maybe you can't do a future order. So there's definitely consideration, with all that combined. And yeah, too many people, I think, you have to consider too that number 1 spot, number 2 spot. You might get there eventually. Obviously, that's your goal, but you're not going to get there the moment you place your order with your supplier, right, and pay that money, or even the moment you get to Amazon. It's going to take some time, most likely, depending on the niche, but it's going to take some time to get up to that spot. So you can't base your velocity of sales from day one on that number 1 or 2 spot for your keyword. So, okay. All right. Another great tip, mistake to avoid ordering too many units. So we've looked at, picking the right product, people wanting to do test orders, ordering too many units. How about, Andy, I think I'm going to go to you on this one because like you said before, this is a get real talk. And I think some people you need to get real with some people about this one, right? And that is people that think that their price is going to be like way higher than what the current competition is on Amazon. Can you kind of talk about that and what people should realistically, getting real, what they should expect?
Sure. So again, another thing that we'll see, sellers, will come to us and they found a product and they found a hidden niche, and then they'll make some adjustments to the product. So maybe they add, some various colors to it, or maybe they make like a slight tweak to it. And they think that making those adjustments, they're then going to be able to leapfrog the price of the current selling model on Amazon. So say, they found the product and it's selling at $19.99. They think that their tweaks are going to be able to jump that price up to $24.99. And, in our experience, that's not the case. Unless you're making like extremely, big changes to the product, or you're adding some really good value to the product, generally, you're going to have to come in at a lower price. So you're going to usually undercut what the current model is, and then you're going to raise your price slowly. And I think what happens a lot of times, people get in the mindset, they find this product and maybe the margin isn't there. So maybe they've really struggled and they haven't been able to find a supplier that's selling the product, at a price that gives them good margin. But they see it selling on Amazon. There's not a lot of competition, and so in their mind, they think, well, you know what? I'm just going to add a few things to it. I'm going to be able to raise the price on Amazon. Therefore, I'll be able to make my margin. And, from our standpoint, that's wrong thinking. You don't want to think like that. What you need to do probably is you need to dig in and really find various suppliers that are going to sell you a quality product at the margin that you want to sell it at a similar price point to the product that's already selling on Amazon.
And it's tough because a lot of these products that sellers are considering are much better than the current competition, right? So it's, their product in our minds or as sellers should be able to command that higher price, right? It makes sense to us as sellers. However, you almost have to think in this standpoint as a buyer, right? If you yourself are going to Amazon, a lot of times you're not making all of these, you might not even click on the listing because you see the price is higher. You might just click on the lower priced listing that's already in the number 1, 2, 3 spot of search. And, you go down to the bottom of the page and you see this one that's $5 more and it looks pretty similar. It's like, as a buyer, you're not even seeing all the information and seeing how much better it is. Maybe if you were holding it in their hand, if it was in a retail store, they would buy that better one because they see how much better the quality is. But online, you can't always tell that. So you almost have to think from, an Amazon buyer standpoint. Amazon is very price driven, right? Buyers, customers, shoppers go to Amazon all the times to get a good price. They do want quality as well, but unless you have those reviews established and a good search rank, you might not be able to see that. So it takes time. And I think that's great. Yeah. Come in being aggressive, right? Looking to almost undercut or bring a better product at the same value, right? We want to be aggressive. We're new to the market. We want to come in strong and bring a great product at a great price. And then maybe later, once you do get those reviews, once you do get some social proof, then you can raise your price and get an even better margin, but don't force the margin that's not there, right?
Yes. And, I want to add to that, there are certain products and markets that people are just willing to pay a certain amount for a product, and that's it. And they're not going to pay any more. So, let's say I'm going to do barbecue gloves and the average, price of barbecue gloves is like $15 to $20. And I'm going to add this beautiful case made from, stainless steel or something for the barbecue gloves, right? And I think I'm going to charge $40 because I now have this different product with this beautiful case. But you have to understand that the market, people generally don't care. They're not going to pay that much for barbecue gloves, and you're not going to get the money. So sometimes people want to bundle something together, or add something and increase the price. But you also have to understand that what the market is willing to pay generally for that type of product, and that kind of no matter what you do, you're not going to command a certain price that and just people won't pay for it. So understanding that, and kind of looking at the average price for products in the market and being sort of in that target generally is, I think, where you need to be.
And I think there's some psychology involved there too, where like Andy gave an example of $19.99 to $24.99. I think as a consumer shopper standpoint, that's like a big jump, right? From that 1990. There's a reason we always end with 99 or 97, right? Because it seems like it's less than $20. It's kind of psychologically, it makes it seem like it's a lot more expensive. So you have to be considering those things a little bit when you're deciding on what your price is going to be. All right, so we looked at, picking the wrong product to avoid that mistake, avoid making the mistake of doing test orders for all your products, ordering too many units, and then thinking that your price is you're gonna be able to come in and just command a much higher price. A fifth mistake is not budgeting for a market budget. Andy, I know you talk a lot about this in our inner circle group, that you can't just spend every single dollar you have on inventory initially. You need to kind of build in a marketing budget. So you want to go through the reason why it's so important to have that marketing budget for your new product?
Sure. So we all know the worst place to be in search on Amazon if you have a product is probably page 2. So the joke that some folks use is, if you want to hide a dead body, put it on page 2 of the keywords that you're trying to rank for. Amazon customers, generally they're going to buy the top 3 products, right, that are in position 1, 2, or 3. If you're on mobile, you're not going to scroll forever. And so in order for you to get your product at that premium place, you have to have a marketing budget. And what happens a lot of times, again, is people will purchase, their sourcing, and so they'll buy inventory, and they basically, they use all of their money on their cost of goods, on purchasing their inventory. They get the inventory into Amazon, and then they realize they don't have any money for marketing purposes. And you have to budget for that. So again, that's another key metric that we put in our product evaluation tool is we want the members to understand, and we want them to give a dollar figure to the amount of money that they're going to spend in marketing the product to get it off of that place where you can hide a dead body, because we want you to be in the number 1, number 2, number 3 place of search. And we want you to understand how much money it's going to cost to get there.
Yeah, and you'll need to do photography. You'll need to do sponsored ads. There's costs to initially launching a product that you want to budget for.
So Liron, what's your estimate, or is there like a percentage, or how do you give advice to someone new to say, like, maybe how much they should be budgeting towards these additional stuff besides just their inventory and shipping costs?
Yeah, so I think for as far as like the marketing budget to, let's say, get some initial sales velocity, it kind of depends on the keyword that you are targeting, or kind of where you want to be in search to get there. For example, if you're going into the fish oil market for supplements, I would say you need, I don't know, $20,000. I don't know. I haven't done the math, but you're going to need a lot of money, right? Whereas if you're going into a market that's not as competitive, then you might need, $500 in terms of, a giveaway. And that's really in unit.
Or like you said, if you pick a really golden product like that one you recently had, you probably need very, very few dollars, right? So it does depend on the competitiveness a little bit of.
And then you should set a budget for, photography. You can get photography for as cheap as, we have our photography service, which is amazingfreedom.com/magic. It's a good place to start. It's $129 for 7 image, where we add lifestyle photos and take your images that maybe you took with your cell phone and actually using designers that we have in Photoshop to make them look really good. That's $129. Or you can hire a lifestyle photographer that's going to go out and do images, with models and stuff, and you might pay, $500 for that. So you want to kind of budget for what you're going to do. You have to budget whether or not you're going to write the listing yourself, or you're going to outsource the copywriting. It's something also that we do that you can get at amazingfreedom.com/ listing, I believe. And so again, is it something you're going to do, or you're going to outsource, right? Are you going to pay for it? Are you going to, do photography yourself and still make sure it's really good, or are you going to outsource it? And what is it going to cost you? Sponsored ads, are you going to, I recommend doing sponsored ads, even starting out with $10 or $20 a day budget. Is something you're going to want to do initially to, get a little bit of traffic to your listing and start getting sales and getting those initial reviews. So you need to just, that the key is that you have a plan, and you know what your launch plan is, and then you budget for that once you have your product picked, and you realize what it's going to take to be able to rank that product, and also what it's going to take to launch it in terms of photography, listing, sponsored ads.
Awesome. So that gives us a good look at, those 5 mistakes to avoid. Again, number one, picking the wrong product is a mistake to avoid. So much hangs on that research phase and picking the right product in order to have success. So you really need to follow what we teach and not go after too saturated of products, making sure there's enough customer demand and the margins are there. Mistake number 2, don't do a bunch of test orders, in our opinion. It seems like it makes sense, but you really just want to follow the system and process that works for private label. Number 3, don't order too many units. Like Leron said, he would rather go out of stock and make sure that there's success there instead of being stuck with too much inventory. So erring on the conservative side, if you're just starting off, is usually good. And number 4, don't think that your price is going to be able to be way higher than the current competition. Don't think you're going to be able to come in and command a much higher price just because you've made a small tweak to your product. And then number 5, make sure that you're budgeting or, considering a marketing budget in addition to those units that you're paying for and your shipping costs. Make sure you have that marketing budget so that once you get to Amazon, those units aren't just stuck there and you're going to be able to move them. So thank you, Andy. Thank you, Leron, for those awesome 5 mistakes to avoid. Like Andy said, we got real here in this episode. There is hard work involved with private label and building an Amazon business, but if you do it right, you can find major success, and the golden nuggets and golden niches, the opportunities, they are out there to build brands. We're doing it every day. We're seeing our members doing it every single day. So avoid these mistakes. Learn from the mistakes that other sellers have made in the past and gain experience. And hey, don't forget to join our amazing Freedom-Amazon Sellers Facebook group. We'll talk more in there, do some more live videos, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Amazon Seller Podcast.
You've been listening to the Amazon Seller Podcast. Make sure to subscribe and join us next time for another look at how to dominate the Amazon marketplace.